Hello, my name is Courtney McAfee, Account Director at the full-service communications and technology firm West Carey Group. This is the third installment of Henrico EDA's Henrico Internet Infrastructure webinar series. Before we begin, I want you to know that the webinar is being recorded for your convenience. So if you miss anything or want to share what you've learned here today, the video will be available on our website at www.henrico.com and on Henrico EDA's social channels very soon. Also, there'll be an opportunity for everyone to ask panelists questions at the end of the webinar. We've reserved a little over 10 minutes for this section. So if we aren't able to get to your question, or if you think of something after the webinar has ended, please send your inquiries to info@henrico.com and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Well, that's more than enough time hearing me talk. And without further ado, I'll pass the conversation over to Vinay Nagpal.
Thank you, Courtney. Hello, everyone. My name is Vinay Nagpal. I'm the president of InnoGlobix, a global consultancy and advisory firm focused on the convergence of data centers and Subsea. And I'm the executive director of the Internet Ecosystem Innovation Committee, or IEIC. The topic of today's panel discussion is one that's very, very interesting and intriguing in terms of the internet infrastructure and the growth that we have witnessed. Clearly, the year 2020 has been a pivotal year for the internet, as at a very fundamental level, it has made us all realize that the internet is truly the fourth utility and is no less important to our lives as compared to water, gas, electricity. The past year saw us utilize the internet in ways we never imagined before. Zoom has now become a verb, leading the chart amongst other video conferencing platforms, fueling the growth of synchronous bandwidth utilization, amongst other things. Google's virtual classroom is an essential tool for every household with kids. And when it comes to celebrating our kids' birthdays or social get-togethers, we rely on the internet for various aspects of our lives more than ever before. As we use the internet and its abundant applications, not oftentimes do we think about the underlying infrastructure that makes it all happen. According to a recent report issued by Telegeography, which is one of the reputed and very well-respected research firm, they issue these statistics on internet utilization. The international internet capacity growth in the last year was at 35%. Similar growth statistics were reported from around the world, whether it's from cloud providers, content distribution networks, internet exchange points, and others. Speaking of internet exchange points, if we look at DE-CIX as an example, which owns and operates world's largest neutral interconnection platform, they reported that they saw a total of 32 exabytes of data traffic flow through its global platform last year. Now, one would think 32 exabytes, how do you kind of relate to that? Well, the video call we are having now is for 1 hour. 32 exabytes of data is what you would transfer if this call was for 8 million years. And if you have one of the newer laptops with, let's say, 1 terabyte of hard drive, in comparative terms, that's equivalent to 32 million such laptops worth of data. Which was traversed in the last year alone. So to keep that data flowing from point A to point B, we need robust and resilient internet infrastructure. And that forms the topic of today's discussion in Henrico, which is the Henrico County in Richmond and the global connectivity enhancements that have taken place in the past year. I'm joined by a group of industry leaders from various subsectors of the internet infrastructure industry. We have with us a leading hyperscaler and content provider, Facebook, represented by Smitty, who is the director of network investments for Americas region. Smitty is a seasoned data center executive with extensive experience in product and marketing related functions. Eric Kontag is with us, who is the executive chairman of GlobeNet and also the chairman and president of Suboptic, another industry organization. From a Subsea operator standpoint, we also have Telxius represented by Gerardo Bonilla. Gerardo is the head of sales and a seasoned executive when it comes to Subsea and telecommunications industry, driving Telxius's commercial relationships in Americas. Tad Deriso is with us as the president and CEO of Mid-Atlantic Broadband Communities Corporation. which is a nonprofit middle mile fiber provider in Virginia. So as much as we talk about Subsea, at the end of the day, you need terrestrial fiber, and you need a lot of it to connect different locations together. We'll be hearing from Tad about some of the new enhancements that Tad's team has done. And from Henrico Economic Development Authority, we'll be joined by Henrico's Executive Director, Anthony Romanello, who's been instrumental behind driving the public-private partnerships at Henrico overall, and in particular as it pertains to internet infrastructure. Our keynote today is going to be provided by Ivo Ivanov, who is the CEO of DE-CIX. He has been leading DE-CIX's international expansion of their global platform. DE-CIX, for those of you know, started about 25 years ago as a very small, humble internet exchange out of a post office in Frankfurt. And under Ivo's leadership, today DE-CIX is a global interconnection platform, and in fact, world's largest. When Richmond was announced to be part of DE-CIX's platform, it was city number 27 in December. And since then, in the last month and a half, Ivo has announced a 28th city, which is a country as well, Brunei. So today, DE-CIX is in 14 countries and 28 cities around the world. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Ivo so he can share with us his views about the importance of the infrastructure and the role DE-CIX plays. Ivo, over to you.
Thank you, Vinay, for this great and very lovely introduction. I'm impressed by the very broad perspective you gave already on the importance of digital infrastructure as always. And I want to thank Anthony and his team from the Henrico Economic Development Authority for hosting us on this very important topic about digitalization and digital infrastructure as the foundation. The keynote I want to share with you is based on thoughts on trends we have as DE-CIX observed over the past couple of months, but also past couple of years, and our predictions for what can be important for the future based on these trends. I want to share with you a couple of slides, so afterwards we can have hopefully a very interesting discussion based on the ideas and the thoughts, which I want to start sharing with you now. I hope you all see my screen, and it's about connectivity enhancements and serving the digital transformation needs everywhere around the globe. Vinay just mentioned what DE-CIX stands for. Here, a couple of more details just in a very brief introduction. As of now, DE-CIX provides layer 2 interconnection platform services in 4 markets in North America. The recent one announced was the Richmond one in Virginia, and I believe this will become a very important place to do digital business and digital infrastructure services on the East Coast, serving the Mid-Atlantic corridor. But if you look at this, these 4 markets for North America, they already bring together an ecosystem, a great ecosystem of 350 plus networks. And through these networks, within the radius of 15 milliseconds, more than 80% of the population of the United States can be accessed by content and content delivery networks and by application providers, including cloud connectivity services. What is beyond is that this ecosystem is already connected to the rest of the world, which results to I believe a great ecosystem for a lot of digital business, and as Vinay mentioned, the largest data center and carrier neutral ecosystem in the world. The latest additions with India and Southeast Asia at our end, they created an incredible further gravity for this ecosystem and its growth. Now, let's think about digitalization. Digitalization in our daily life, in the way we live, the way we entertain ourselves and our friends and families, the way we work. And let's have a brief overview on what happened in the past couple of decades if we talk about digitalization, digital gadgets, electronics in general. So you see, It's about communication. It's about publication. Differences between 1930 and 2010. I hope all of us remember how it was 2010, especially having the nice smartphones in our hands, where a lot of applications started to become very popular. This is about working on with a desktop. A lot of changes happened over time here as well, related to digitalization and the digital gadgets. Also, if it comes to entertainment, over the past couple of years, changes have been everywhere. It's a bit always about work-life balance as well. Talking about balance, we see that digitalization started to have impact in a lot of different areas, and the parents in our audience, they know what I'm talking about if it comes to gaming. It's quite hard now to find guys on the street playing. If they want to play, even being in the same neighborhood, everybody stays in its own room at home and meets on FIFA 2021, on Fortnite or others, just to mention a couple of names of very popular online games today. That's all about gadgets. Differences just within 10 years. It's self-explaining, and last but not least, this is the funny statement behind of this nice comparison. I don't remember the times of the landline united the family, but I truly sometimes experience how the usage of mobile devices can divide the family. So this is it's more fun than reality, of course, and I wanted to share this with you just for a bit different perspective on digitalization and gadgets, which is more important than to ask ourselves what will happen next. What will happen next is obvious. Vinay mentioned this, and we see this daily in with our kids, with our co-workers, actually everywhere. A new digital era with a new interconnection model around our industry, will be needed everywhere because of digitalization everywhere for everything and everyone. This is the era which already started and will dictate the digital infrastructure industry in general for the next decades, the next years and decades. And it's based on digitalization in all these different segments, disregarding if it's education, entertainment, healthcare, agriculture, transportation, mobility in general, finance services, or in manufacturing and robotics. This is the era of digitalization in our daily lives. And let's have a look on what will drive infrastructure around this, disregarding if it's in a business world or in our private world. We see here just a couple of examples, like in the business world, video conferencing, which is in our day life today, where homes became our offices. Applications like Teams, WebEx, Skype for Business, just to mention a couple of those, are essential part of our daily business communication. And this video conferencing itself requires a very robust infrastructure already, with a symmetric in terms of traffic distribution in both directions, etc. Virtual desktops, cloud connectivity. And if it comes down, if we think further to very sophisticated solutions of lifetime, real time, e-manufacturing and e-robotics, where they can be trained even in real time, then digital infrastructure becomes extremely important. And I'll show you just in a second why. The private life. In our private life, we experience already virtual doctor visits. The entire e-health service segment became extremely popular for very good reasons. E-learning, online gaming, live streaming, just to mention a couple of very important and extremely relying on a robust digital infrastructure services. Mobility in our cars we can buy today. They're not a car only. They're smartphones, tablets, they're big computers on wheels, and this will become even more popular in the future. All this, dear friends of infrastructure and digitalization, requires the lowest latency possible. And you see, we tried to put the latency requirement in relation to the different applications, and the applications today actually almost all of them hate to have higher latency than 65 milliseconds max. The really cool online gaming applications, real-time gaming applications, they require lower than 30 milliseconds. And if it comes down the road to automotive digital applications, if it comes to e-manufacturing or real life e-health solutions for surgeries, etc., the 1 millisecond, every single millisecond counts. In perspective of distance, this means that infrastructure, if we put the milliseconds in relation to distance, has to get really close to the users, has to be closer to hospitals, to highways, has to get closer to where enterprises, they have their manufacturing processes established, they do produce services, etc. Actually, in general, has to be as close as possible to where the single users are using the services, disregarding if the usage happens in our living room or in our office or in the manufacturing areas. So our mandate is to bring digital applications and content as close as possible to people and business, because every single millisecond counts. Latency is the new currency in our infrastructure. On exchanges and interconnection platforms, we focus on this a lot, but this is valid for a lot of subsea cable investments, terrestrial investments, software developments, etc. Latency plays already a huge role in our industry because of the accelerated digitalization of enterprises as well. This will drive a lot. And let me tell you why. We at DE-CIX focused analyzing three selected sectors: automotive, finance, and healthcare, and discovered that all these three, they have their specific needs and their specific challenges. Let's have a look into the automotive using just a very simple example of a digitalized car. And I'm not talking about even autonomous driving. It's about the digital services and digital plans around the car with the millions of sensors possible in the car and around the car in the environment. If we can see the car as a data pool, 70% of the data of the car is actually in-car data flow. But the rest, the 30 other percent, are extremely important, because 5 of those are car-to-car, another 5 are car to environment, and 20 are car to cloud already today. And these 30%, they have something in common. They are real-time data. And they require the most robust infrastructure which can be delivered, the best latency which can deliver, and the highest security which can be delivered. Let's see the finance sector. Finance is on digitalization everywhere, focused on different even investments. We know big banks, they started investing in subsea cables, not as an asset investment, they invest for their own infrastructure needs. We see how important the entire digital journey in the finance sector became. We know that banks, they do not focus on mortgage and loan services only anymore because this became commodity. They try to monetize the entire data value chain and the data journey, also getting engaged in real estate, the real estate business and other upsell services around the commodity financial services, serving enterprises and individuals in their entire life circle. They want to manage this from the digital asset perspective point of view. And you see open banking standards are important. Security plays an extremely important role with data operability and interoperability, with a mitigation of cloud concentration risk, increasing cost efficiency, and data analytics. There's so much to be said about the finance sector, and all these new digital services, they will require the infrastructure needed for, last but not least, health, e-health, virtual doctor visits. They grow almost weekly. We have the remote patient management, access to care, screening and diagnostics, prescriptions. All this creates data, the different gadgets involved in e-health and virtual doctor visits. They can produce a lot of nice services if the infrastructure behind this is a proper one. And we all can imagine how sensitive the data in this sector is and how high the security requirements are already. So what do these three sectors have in common? They have common challenges and trends we can summarize into best security possible, the fastest solution in terms of infrastructure, efficiency, and compliancy. Having said this, we have thought at DE-CIX at least that over time we will see the creation of private interconnection ecosystems extremely focused on compliancy, efficiency, low latency, and security. We at DE-CIX started the program of enterprise interconnection federation services and closed user groups around this, which are nothing else than extremely flexible and highly secure private interconnection ecosystems on the top of the global interconnection ecosystem. We run. Different organizations can create their own private environment virtually, meeting all the compliance and security requirements, and even creating federations around industry segments like automotive, finance, healthcare, e-government, etc., just to mention a couple of those. And a look into the future, closed user groups, I just discussed. This is already reality. We started first pilots with automotive companies and financial institutions, and the edge is very popular around the edge. And there are a lot of solutions which need to happen in terms of infrastructure, getting data center modules as close as possible to the edge, getting interconnection solutions as close as possible to the edge. And last but not least, the LEO satellite industry will create a huge further area of activities needed. Let us see the example of the 5G interconnection needed. I call it the DE-CIX digital interconnection triangle. This is at least what we are working on, creating interconnection solutions, mini platforms which can be placed at highway crossroads, cell towers, etc. Whatever 5G needs to be successfully and reliably managed by digital infrastructure. And triangle, because it consists of three elements: artificial intelligence, managing the tons of data streams on the different sequences and frequencies in the 5G standard between the IoTs, data flows, which is the second element, and of course the 5G data streams in general. They built the third element in this triangle. Thanks Globics magazine for creating this nice illustration around this. I'm happy to use here. And my last outlook is the LEO satellite technology is a really exciting one. I believe this technology will create a game-changing infrastructure approach if it comes to areas around the globe which are extremely hard from the business case perspective, but even from the infrastructure build perspective to be served by terrestrial fiber or subsea. We will see this becoming extremely popular. A lot of areas, even in the United States, in the rural areas, but also in Africa, Southeast Asia, even India, huge subcontinent with a lot of areas where terrestrial cables infrastructure cannot be built. Our program for this, we call it the DE-CIX program, working with LEO satellite operators to create ground aggregation stations. We will not shoot up in the stratosphere and internet exchange, but will serve their interconnection aggregation needs on the ground. And this graphic explains how we see this, having collaboration with our data center partners. So I hope all this gives us a lot of ideas and nice reasons to discuss in the remaining minutes of this beautiful webinar. And extremely happy to be part of this discussion. I want to thank you for the attention and supporting digital infrastructure.
Thank you so much, Ivo. That was absolutely incredible in terms of the various aspects of digital infrastructure you touched upon. And clearly, I think we're very fortunate to have DE-CIX in the Commonwealth of Virginia, deploying its global platform. So thank you for that. You
Very
talked
welcome.
about latency being the new currency, right? I mean, that's near and dear to everyone's heart, especially as we look at from an enterprise perspective. More and more enterprises are moving towards their digital transformation efforts, fast tracking those. There's more digitalization happening everywhere. And also from a content provider perspective as well, it's important to have low latency numbers, diversity. We have with us one of our panelists here is Schmitty from Facebook. And as many of us know, Facebook recently announced their phase one of $1.75 billion data center campus in Henrico. They also were instrumental in the first subsea cable to land in the Commonwealth of Virginia, the Maria subsea cable. So Smitty, I'd like to turn over to you to kind of get your thoughts on importance of latency, diversity, and of course, clearly you have, in the context of our discussion, a significant play on the data center side and on the subsea side as well. So just would like to turn it over to you to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, latency and diversity are really important to us. One, to get the content to our user community, based on the different platforms that we have, whether it's Instagram, the Blue product, which is a regular Facebook product, WhatsApp, and all those is important. And one of the reasons why we went to Henrico and went to Virginia was because of that. With partnership with Telxius and Microsoft, we landed our submarine system Maria in Virginia Beach, and it was really critical for us because at that point in time, we went through Hurricane Sandy. We've had multiple instances that have happened on the northeastern part of the U.S., and finding an alternate location was critically important to us. And in doing that, it led to us doing that data center in Richmond, again, for a diversity aspect of making sure that we have multiple data centers across the US, but also having data centers that are diverse from one another and lead to, the Maria system, Brusa, and other systems now that are coming into the Virginia Beach area.
Yeah, clearly, I mean, Schmitty, Maria was a catalyst in bringing in other systems, and diversity as a theme has resonated so well from an industry standpoint. Because to make an interconnection hub, an interconnection ecosystem thrive, you need various different aspects of the business, various different subsectors and the players, and many of whom we have on the call today. Eric, I'd like to get your thoughts. You're an industry leader when it comes to subsea telecommunication systems. You've been around, a very long time. Can you, from your perspective, the way you look at things, talk about the importance of diversity, and also from a subsea perspective as it comes to, some of the newer models when we talk about the convergence of subsea with data centers, is the landing of the subsea cable moving inland with the SLTE potentially being at the data center. So if you can share some of your thoughts there.
Sure, absolutely. I think over the last, let's say, 20 years, we have seen tremendous change even in the way that you architect submarine cable systems. But I would say that in the last probably 5 is where we saw that exponential growth in terms of the capacity that a system can carry and so on. But the design criteria has also changed, right? I mean, you used to go, let's say, from city center pops to city center pops was the idea. But basically, there was a demarc at the cable landing station, right? So you picked, for example, in our case, when our system was designed in the early 2000s, in order to carry the capacity that they had designed it at the time, the electronics, the optronics and the lasers were just not there for very, very long distances. So you found intermediary places like Fortaleza to land the cable, regenerate, and then go further south, right? With today's technology, you can actually have express routes, Trans-Pacifics, that carry a huge amount of capacity. Obviously, the industry has learned an awful lot with Maria in terms of what you can do with optical equipment at the network physical endpoints. And then when you design the system, like the one that we're doing, for example, in partnership let's say with Facebook between Brazil and Argentina, you look at those things specifically, whether or not you want to land the system and leave the electronics at the cable landing station, whether you want to extend those, let's say, to the city center POP, right? Those are things that can be done now with the latest technology, and they're designed that you couldn't do before. It's very market specific to some extent, and is what is it that you're trying to achieve, let's say, in the process and in your design. But what we have seen, depending on the geography that you happen to be in, is you have these hubs that have popped up around the world, because it allows you to have multiple systems coming together in one particular location, and then from there eventually extending to other sites or connecting, let's say, or interconnecting out those hubs. For example, the case of Marseille, that's one of them where you have several systems coming in. Data centers have grown, points of interconnection have grown. EVO with DE-CIX is present in those locations. And if you have enough or important number of subsea assets coming in, you have a good facility that is carrier neutral, and you have, let's say, the local providers, you start to create that ecosystem that is so important for the interconnection that Ivo talked about, let's say, during his kickoff. And one of the offshoots of that is how you design the actual facilities at the beach, where a cable landing station, and many around the world, are now being designed as a small-scale data center, right? It's going from, let's say, DC voltage to really thinking about this as a place that's going to grow over time, that can host a cloud instance, that can host a 500 kilowatt POP, or that's going to hold a series in a multi-tenant environment of content providers that benefit from that ecosystem. So yes, we're seeing that as a new emergence in the data center, in the subsea and data center space.
Absolutely, and I think you're absolutely right, Eric, in terms of the last 5 years, in terms of the resurgence that's underway. If you look at purely from a subsea standpoint, right? I mean, subsea cables have been around for over 162 years, and the way I like to put it is, it took 162 years to have an aggregate of around 448 subsea cables, and in the last 4 years alone, we've got 107 and counting new systems. So from a growth, representing around $13.8 billion in value creation. So from a growth perspective, it's been unprecedented, but at the same time, in a lot of cases, we are seeing more and more hyperscalers and cloud data centers on both ends of these cable systems. In many other cases, as you said, even as private cables, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But at the same time, for a subsea operator, it's also about striking those relationships and having those partnerships like Telxius does. And speaking of that, Gerardo, can you share with us, from Telxius's standpoint, the importance of those partnerships and relationships when it comes to reselling capacity across systems? And also, I mean, it's pretty phenomenal the way I look at it, that Telxius has a key role to play in all three existing operating subsea cables that land in the Commonwealth of Virginia: Maria, Bruce, and Dunant. So I'd like to get some perspective from you there, Gerardo.
Yeah, thank you, Vinay. No, so absolutely, for us, it's critical, the relationship, the new model in the subsea cable industry, and the relationships and the partnerships that we've been able to establish with some of the major OTTs, like you mentioned, and some of the cables that land in Virginia, but not only those, and some of the other newer cable systems that we're now working on, or that we're now announcing. So, for example, the one that we're working now in the Mid-Atlantic region, or in Virginia coming in, the newest one is the Dunant cable system, which is a joint system with Google. And some of you may have heard also our recent announcement with the Grace Hopper cable system, another cable system that'll be going from New York to the UK and to Spain. So in addition to those cable systems, we're also working with Google on two of their other systems, the Junior cable system in connecting Rio to Sao Paulo in Brazil, and then also interconnecting Brazil, Uruguay, and Argentina. So in addition to all the diversity that that's been discussed now For example, here in the Mid-Atlantic region, the geographic diversity to Ashburn, the geographic diversity to New York and New Jersey and to Florida, where all other existing cable systems land. So you have that geographic diversity there in the Richmond area, the Henrico area. But one of the really exciting things now is that Telxius is the only, one of the few, if not the only infrastructure provider that is now able to offer transatlantic diversity to our customers. So we can offer complete diversity across the Atlantic now with our Dunant cable system, with the Dunant cable system and our Maria cable system. So on both of those systems, and we can also offer diversity to the major Latin American destinations such as Rio, Sao Paulo, Buenos Aires, Bogota, utilizing our first cable system, which is the San Juan cable system, and then also utilizing our Brusa cable system directly from the QTS Richmond NAP or from any of our other POPs on the East Coast, using the San Juan cable system or the Brusa cable system, and then tying into these new cable systems that I mentioned, like the Junior interconnecting Rio and Sao Paulo, and the Tanat cable system that we can use to interconnect from Brazil into Argentina. So we're really the only company that can offer you that complete diversity across the Atlantic and into major destinations in Latin America. So that's now available directly out of the QTS Richmond NAP, and that is very recent for us, something that we announced November of last year. So now we're offering our complete portfolio of capacity services out of the Richmond NAP, as well as our IP services. So we're really excited about that. As Smitty has mentioned, or as Ivo had mentioned, latency is the new currency. So that's very important, the ability for us to be able to offer our IP services there directly in Richmond, which is really the closest point to these major destinations in Europe, Paris, Madrid, the key exchange points in Frankfurt, Marseille, etc., and also key Latin American destinations. So customers are really keen to connect to our routers there, which is really the closest point to those eyeballs in Europe and in Latin America.
Yeah, Gerardo, I was going to say that to your comment about the diversity across the Atlantic. I mean, in a span of short 3.5 years, we've gone from 0% of East Coast of US subsea capacity going to the Mid-Atlantic region, which by the end of this year is going to be, if you look at some of the statistics, almost 18%. And clearly, I'm looking at the map, which is right behind you as your background. So the loop you're talking about is from Henrico on the Maria and the Dunant cable and going into Europe. So today you're saying you have the ability to offer services completely diverse from the QTS Richmond NAP to Europe in different parts of Europe across that loop.
Right, that'll be actually as of next month in March. Right now, the system Dunant's in service. Right now, we're just finalizing our dark fiber network in Europe. So the interconnections from Paris to our communications hub in Dario, Spain, to tie into the Maria.
Yeah, I think it just opens a lot of doors for the enterprises and the overall community in the region to have access to such diversity, and not to miss the fact that the fastest maximum capacity subsea systems out there today. Clearly, Gerardo, I mean, landing of a subsea cable, we heard from Erica a few points about the CLS versus data center and some of the convergence aspects happening. But, I would be remiss, Tad, if I didn't talk about terrestrial fiber. Clearly, terrestrial fiber comes in to interconnect where the subsea lands and then goes to places. And you have, I think the way I look at you, Tad, and MBC, as a nonprofit middle mile fiber provider in central Southern Virginia, and you have pretty extensive coverage. But I think you have a very unique proposition when it comes to this audience here. It's not just on the terrestrial fiber side, but also you've got some very early hands-on experience with the subsea cable aspect of the landing as well. Perhaps you can touch on that a little bit and talk about some of your newer developments for the region, Tad, as well, when it comes to terrestrial fiber.
Sure. Thanks, Vinay. Yeah, it's been fascinating to watch the development of QTS and how our network kind of interconnected there. And just, I mean, 5 or 6 years ago, we started seeing just a little bit of access into QTS. So kind of our world, we're much different than most of the panelists here on this session. We're not quite the global company. We do quite a bit of stuff here in the Commonwealth. But what's been fascinating is, you know, we're pretty simple, right? We're a wholesale provider. We provide layer 1, layer 2 transport, dark fiber, basically enable billion-dollar telecommunications companies and small ISPs to get to IP peering points and get access to those areas. So when QTS came around, just thinking about, you know, when we started and got our network up and running, there was quite a bit of access. We had an Equinix Ashburn, again, acquiring fiber from third parties, lighting up our own network, and seeing ISPs pay IP transit, what, $45, $50 a megabit before we came along, down to like $2 to $3 a megabit to connect those things. So when we look at that evolution of QTS, that was huge for our customers, right? So we're the dumb pipes. We connect these internet providers to the internet and peering exchanges, and being able to see QTS and their facility kind of grow from 6-7 years ago. We had a single, I think it was a 100 megabit circuit from one of our carriers in the southwest of the state, just a direct point to point to connect one of their colo facilities. And today we're seeing 10 gig, 100 gig, lots of dark fiber from our ISPs that are peering at the Richmond NAP, where before it was Equinix Ashburn or trying to get those access points. But now having that facility in Henrico in this part of Virginia is making a huge difference, right? And we're, again, it's not massive. We're seeing, you know, tens of thousands, close to 100,000 eyeballs that we're taking in and being able to peer in QTS. But a big driver of that was for us to build our own facilities and our own sheath into the QTS data center. And, you know, thanks to some of our customers that have been able to make that happen, we've seen a big resurgence, right? So the ability for us to provide that diversity, and, you know, we've been able to depend on routes from Summit IG and MFN and Windstream, Cox, Comcast, I think I got everybody, Verizon maybe, you know, have that connectivity, but our customers just need diverse paths and they need multiple fiber strands to be able to do that. So just about a month ago, we announced that new build into the QTS data center, the first entrance on the south end of the campus. So that just provides more diversity, more redundancy. And as everybody on the panel has talked about today, you know, that's a real key in our industry. Just having multiple paths that enable them to do what they do best and provide that connectivity to their customers.
Absolutely, Tad. I mean, I tell people this all the time. You can't ever have too much diversity. You can't ever have too much fiber. I mean, given the way things are headed. And I think I applaud you for this newest development with 864 aggregate count of fiber strands that you brought into the region in a fully diverse way. But I think you hit on another key point about, you know, even when you were saying if you covered everyone in terms of all the players involved, and I completely agree with you that it's a matter of the community coming together and playing their respective part. And yet it's not an overnight thing that you know flip a switch and you develop an ecosystem like what's been happening in Henrico, right? It takes time, it takes patience, it takes a lot of support from the industry, but it also takes, you know, another aspect which we don't see a lot happening, which is that public-private partnership. You know, when we look at a local region, a local county, a local jurisdiction, Anthony, you know, when I first met him, the way I look at it, that has been from the very beginning an ally of the industry, always wanting to be part of the different companies involved in the infrastructure and wanting to lead that growth of the sector. So Anthony, I'd like to hear from you firsthand. How's that journey been for you personally, if I may ask you? And what are some of the key attributes that you have been able to observe in that process as we have reached from where we started a few years ago?
Well, I'll tell you, Vinay and guys, I mean, just listening to you guys, I feel like you guys have scored the touchdown, and I get to spike the football because we couldn't ask for better advocates and just in telling the story of what's possible with what we do with the ecosystem. The Henrico started in 1994 in building the White Oak Technology Park. It was intended to be for advanced manufacturing for heavy industry. When QTS came in, and since QTS has come in, and the park has really pivoted, and it's now high tech, and we've got other data centers in the park. Facebook, of course, as Smitty was talking about earlier, has made a major investment there, as well as some others. There's some additional land that we are currently marketing. And I think our role is really to set the table so that the private sector can do what you all need to do to succeed. And when we talk about the diversity of the internet ecosystem, for us, it's the diversity of the economy. And this is a substantial part of our ability to diversify the economy and to really help the businesses that are here, and hopefully the businesses that we are hoping to bring here in their needs for big data, which all of the entities on today's call are really helping to make into a reality. The one statistic that I love to mention to you is that in 2017, around the time that Facebook made their decision, our board of supervisors took the data center tax rate down by 90%. And in that time period since 2017, our data center tax rates are up 800%. So what we're seeing is there's a direct connection between government really setting the table and the private sector making the investments. And I think, as you saw in our preview video for this webinar, I think we're just getting started. I think that's what's most exciting is not where we've been, but where we're going.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anthony. I think you're right about that in terms of getting started. And speaking of which, Ivo, and by the way, just for the audience, we are in our last 15 minutes, so please feel free to ask questions of our panelists. You can type in your questions at the chat window, and I'll be happy to take those. Ivo, as I was mentioning in my opening remarks, I'm in 14 countries, 28 cities around the world. Some are fully mature, some are in the works. I'd like to hear from you firsthand. What have been some of your observations when it comes to building these ecosystems? And from your perspective, what do you see happening in Henrico? Clearly, you believe in it, hence your decision to be in Henrico. But I just like to have you put your industry hat on and just share with us some of your thoughts there, please.
Oh, thank you. That's a great question, and let me answer this in this way. Let's now imagine the world map and see all these well-established, really huge telecommunication hubs we have today around the globe, which have been there for years now. I am talking about hubs like the Greater Metro of New York, the London, Amsterdam, Singapore for sure, Tokyo, LA, Bay Area, Miami. What they have in common? They have in common the landing of tons of subsea capacity. This is where first subsea cable project started, where the landing stations were, etc. And this is one of the key elements for creating a hub, the concentration of capacity. Of course, in my examples, this was the subsea capacity. I gave this example for a good reason, because this element, if we follow on this element, we can see younger hubs which are in process to become really big, hubs like Dubai, because of the subsea landing there. Hubs like Marseille, and Eric mentioned this as well. And there will be more and more happening in the future, like Richmond. So analyzing all this, we can certainly predict that places like Richmond, but also to give you a couple of other examples, like Lisbon, like Fortaleza in Brazil and others, where we see a huge concentration, even more in the future, of capacity landings. They will become the next hubs. They will not replace existing hubs, because we see a huge demand on the market for alternatives, for resilience, for redundancy. So new hubs, new stars for digital infrastructure business and digital services in general, like the Richmond one, are badly needed. The market needs this for resilience reasons, in this case, redundancy to Ashburn, Virginia, in New York, but also in other cases, just to create a new alternative route. And in this case, the South Atlantic or Mid-Atlantic corridor also as an answer to how networks from South America and also networks from North America, they can use alternative new routes for lower latency connectivity to Europe and vice versa, supporting the most direct traffic exchange between the users. And that's all about, I think Schmitty mentioned this, companies like Facebook, of course, their approaches to get their services as close as infrastructure-wise, as close as possible to where their users are, their customers are, because they deserve the best quality and experience possible. And this cannot be served in the future from just 20 or 25 hubs. We need to to give birth to new hubs. We need to give birth to new aggregation points for infrastructure and actually create hundreds of new hubs around the globe to be able to serve the demands I mentioned already in my keynote.
Absolutely, Ivo, and that's been one of the key initiatives of IEIC, or the Internet Ecosystem Innovation Committee, chaired by Dr. Vint Cerf, and we are actively working with the community on that creation. Again, it's no one person who can go make this happen. It's a community effort. The industry has to come together. And of course, there are certain catalysts that we talked about, which ultimately can lead to creation of such diversified interconnection hubs. Schmitty, I have a question for you from the audience. What are the biggest challenges in building resilient networks and peering at the hyperscale level like you have?
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges is keeping up with the demand, right? And you know, as we look at connectivity that we have in the existing infrastructure, Eric brought it up earlier, of leading a charge with optronics and trying to get the most that you can get out of the existing infrastructure while building new infrastructure. It really is the biggest challenge. And back to the diversity play, like you were saying, Vinay, you just can't have one path. You got to have all of them that can support them as well. So those are really the big challenges that we look at from a global perspective, to make sure that we're growing infrastructure and ecosystem. We're getting the most out of the existing infrastructure that's there, and we're trying to push, all of the vendors in order to be able to get the most out of the existing infrastructure and new infrastructure.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right there. Because that infrastructure keeps constantly being upgraded, but at the same time, the diversification and additional routes, more diversified presence, I think that becomes extremely important. Tad, the next question is for you. MBC led the effort for the original Virginia Beach cable landing station in the East Coast. Can you explain what that process was? And did you have to interact with a few different companies to make that happen? For example, sure, selecting the cable site selection for the cable landing station as well?
Yeah, so the question's a bit misleading. We definitely did not lead the effort. We were a part of the team, a small part of the team that consulted with the cable operators, the folks that were doing the cable landing station from Telxius, and is obviously Virginia Beach Economic Development. So we played a very small role, not anywhere near a leadership role on that. But yeah, what was interesting is we talked about that facility, right? So once you bring that connectivity and you have the cable landing station in Virginia Beach, how do you connect that back to where all the peering is happening? So kind of two things happen from that. You have a really good cable landing station that Telxius is at. We built fiber in there with our partner Cox, and I know a couple other carriers have done that as well. So you've got that connectivity, very important in Virginia Beach, because that traffic does need to get back to Richmond and Ashburn and places that other folks need to get to. But as we were going through that process, it was great, because that initiative to put the cable landing station, your PFEs, some have SLTEs there, some don't. We weren't involved in that. But the ability for more carriers to build fiber to that cable landing station facility at Corporate Landing Park has led to more fiber coming into Virginia Beach, which is obviously good for businesses and industries and other carriers in that part of the state.
Absolutely. I think we're getting close to our time slot here. If there are additional questions, we can certainly get to them either now or at a later time. Please feel free to send those. We will follow up. Tad, I'm going to start with you and work backwards, 30 seconds or less. What are the biggest challenges ahead of us for the next decade when it comes to infrastructure?
I think just keeping up with demand, right? Eventually, we're going to run out of right-of-way on some of the VDOT roads. But it's been fascinating to see that growth. We don't see that slowing down. Again, we play we're in a different stack of the network and capacity here, but from a strictly fiber connectivity, connecting data centers, connecting rural parts of the state, we're in it, we breathe it every day, and we just see more and more needs for connectivity, diversity, and being able to continue to grow that ecosystem.
Okay, thank you very much, Gerardo. Your 30 seconds.
Yes, I would say emphasize what Tad said. Definitely more diversity, more resiliency in the infrastructure that we need to continue advancing in the digital age.
Okay, thank you very much, Eric.
I'm very concerned with people. We need to attract the next generation of people that are going to help us design, build, operate, maintain critical infrastructure, ideally a diverse group of people in a very inclusive way. And we need to make infrastructure sexy again. We need to be able to attract these people and say, hey, it's not about the app.
Yep, absolutely. I'm not sure about others, but I think Eric, you may have frozen for me. Schmitty, in the interest of time, I'll move over to you.
Understanding that right behind it, there's this.
Yeah, so Eric hit on it, right? It's
We still need more infrastructure. Here is the proof. Go ahead, Schmitty.
Yeah, we definitely need more infrastructure. We need more people to be involved in infrastructure, and we need to continue to look at it from both sides, not just for putting more fiber into the ground or fiber on poles or whatnot. It's actually continuing to push those companies to get the most efficiency out of it, right? Both on providing more capacity on it, but to what Ivo had said at the beginning of figuring out how you use all of these continued devices where they don't need to use as much infrastructure data in order to be able to do that, where they can reclaim it or store it, and figure out how we can find that balance of consumption versus what's available from a supply perspective.
Absolutely. Thank you. Ivo, over to you.
Yeah, certainly agree with what has been said already. And additionally to this, to be ahead, at least a bit ahead of the requests of all the different organizations who will ask us for greater services and deliver the infrastructure needed. And the second, the challenge will be create the proper awareness with political stakeholders, authorities, and organizations around the globe to support attractive framework environments like the Henrico County did for the data scientists, similar in different parts of the world, attracting digital infrastructure investments and creating an open and easily to access ecosystem, I would say. And the challenge will be to deliver literally everybody on this planet access to digital services. I would say challenge accepted at our end.
Absolutely. That's very, very well said. More infrastructure, optimum utilization, and more people in the industry. Anthony, I want to get your thoughts and hand over to you for some closing remarks as well.
Thank you, Vinay. The big mystery for me today, but Ivo answered that, is why my TV is getting thinner and my pants are getting bigger. So thanks for clarifying that, Ivo. No, I think the challenge for us is to remain relevant and to be in a position to continue to serve the technology-based sectors, because you all are moving so quickly, and we want to make sure as local governments that we're there for you. So let me say thank you to Ivo for the excellent keynote, to Vinay, who's always an outstanding MC, Eric, Gerardo, Schmitty, Tad. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for your wisdom today and for just sort of showing us behind the curtain how it all works. And we really appreciate your time. And definitely, Eric, thank you for your comments about infrastructure and people. And certainly we hope that our panels are going to get even more diverse as we move forward into the future. Thank you for your comment there in the chat. I just want to mention to you all, session number 4 for the Henrico Internet Infrastructure webinar series is May the 20th of this year at 1 o'clock Eastern time. You'll hear from Clinton Hayden with QTS and Dr. Barbara Boyan, who's the Dean of the College of Engineering at Virginia Commonwealth University, along with Vinay and myself, to talk about the Virginia Center for Cloud Computing, an initiative that VCU and QTS are now working through the Virginia legislature. So please join us for that. And as always, you can reach out to us at henrico.com. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Stay well.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.